Welcome in to Vol Basketball Fever, your number one source for discussions about the Vols and Lady Vols basketball programs. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video, and check in every week for new episodes of the show, video breakdowns, and more. Now, on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the Vol Basketball Fever podcast. I am Nathanael Rutherford, and I am joined by a special guest for this episode, Todd Aaron Golden. He is the Indiana State beat writer for the Tribune-Star, and I'm bringing him on here to talk about the newest addition to Tennessee's roster, Tyreke Key, transfer from Indiana State. Todd, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I were talking beforehand here and kind of getting a feel of, your coverage for Indiana State. You said you've been doing this since about 2004 or 2005 or so. So you were the exact perfect person to have on here. And you're talking about, you even followed Tyreke Key before he even was at Indiana State when he was in high school. So you were the exact person I want on here to talk about Tyreke Key. I'm still trying to get him on the show, Tyreke himself, but we'll see if that'll happen. But you are the exact beat reporter I want on here for this discussion. Todd, I got to ask kind of the big question first here about Tyreke Key. Do you know, I don't know how much information you would know about this or not, but do you know how, if he's recovered from that shoulder surgery, and do you know exactly, what the problem was with his shoulder when he had to have surgery and why he elected to have it at the time that he did?
Yeah, he should be he should be fine. I mean, by the later stages of the season, he was shooting at practice. He wasn't doing anything, he wasn't doing any activity on the floor. He wasn't at full go, but he was, it looked like, to me, the last time I saw him practice would have been right before the conference tournament. It looked like he had full range of motion in his arm, and seemed to be fine. What happened with Tyreke is he had three different what they call subluxes on his shoulder, which is basically a fancy way of saying he had a partial shoulder separation, if I can speak. Which doesn't sound serious by itself, but when it recurs like it did, it's kind of a degenerative type of thing. It can create more opportunities for it to occur. And each time it does occur, you are risking more damage to your shoulder before it finally could possibly tear entirely. So when in the preseason before this year, he had another sublux, I think it was in late October, right before the season was about to start. And when he visited the medical people, they basically laid it out for him that said, well, you could continue to play and risk it. It would very likely happen again. But it's sort of a ticking time bomb in the respect that if you don't have surgery to fix it, eventually it's going to become a much bigger problem that could threaten, your career. So the decision was made before the season to have the surgery, which should solve the issue. That's one thing I don't know whether, and I don't know that anybody truly knows whether it's something that could recur again. The surgery is supposed to fix that. And he appeared to be fine. And the last time I saw him with any Indiana State activity, but that was the purpose for doing it. And the idea from Indiana State's perspective is that, they would have had 1 year left for him to kind of continue the transition of the coach here, but Tyreke had other ideas and decided to go home to Tennessee.
Yeah, so because of that shoulder issue, was that an issue that popped up and was bothering him his senior year? Because I look at his shooting numbers, especially mostly from three, and you see his sophomore year where he shot almost 45% from three, his junior year where he shot almost 39% from three, both those really good numbers. And then you have that big drop off where in the 2020-2021 season where he shot 31.6% from three. But I look at his other numbers, and his 2-point field goal percentage was still great. His free throw shooting, which was still great. So was that a case of the shoulder issue popping up at that point, or was there something else?
I can't say that was the main reason for that. Okay. The shoulder injury would have more affected his ability to, to get in the lane and rebound. Tyreke is not a shooter first. He's more of a driver first. So in terms of, I think the shooting percentage drop probably had more to do with the fact that teams were guarding him better out on the perimeter, forcing him to do other things. which he's perfectly capable of doing. I feel his strength, even though he can shoot, is to get in the lane and get fouled. And the offense that Indiana State ran his senior year, or the last year he played, was more dictated to getting others shots too. So I feel like it would probably be a stretch to say the shoulder injury affected his shooting. I can't say that it completely didn't. He tended to suffer these injuries late in the season. The first time it happened would have been his junior year, and it occurred right before the conference tournament. And then I think it occurred again. I'm trying to remember the timeline of his senior year. It was in the last month of the year. So there was a lot of wear and tear involved with this, I suppose, exacerbated it. I'm not a doctor. I'm playing one right now, but, so I would say no on the shooting thing, but it probably did affect him in other ways. He played through pain a lot, just generally, which affected his game, his overall game. So it's something that, he just had to learn to adjust with until he finally did have the surgery. And I think his hope, obviously, is that when he gets to Knoxville, that, he'll be able to be pain-free and play without that in his mind. I think it was probably a mental thing, too, as much as anything, because it was, when was the other shoe going to drop? When is my shoulder going to get hurt again? So he has that out of his mind, and he can play a little freer. And I think that will help his game.
Well, you mentioned something that I had written down too that I was going to ask you. You've already touched on it, so I'll continue with it. You mentioned that he's more of a driver, and that's what I was going to ask, because it seems like he's been a really effective 2-point shooter, especially as kind of like a smaller-ish guard. He's not really small. He's 6'3", 205. I've seen pictures and film of him. He's built, so I know that he looks like he's a pretty strong kid. But you said that's his strength. So is that more what, he still attempted about 3-4 threes per game, it looked like in his career for the most part at Indiana State. But I noticed the numbers and on the film that it seems like he's really good at finishing in the rim, which I think Tennessee lacked from a lot of the guards last year, aside from Kennedy Chandler. So I think personally that fits in really well to what Tennessee needed.
Yeah, no question. He's always been kind of an athletic freak in that sense, even going back to his high school days there in Tennessee. He's got an extremely, how do I put this, pliable body. He's very good at drawing contact and then maintaining his strength to, still get a decent percentage shot off. He doesn't mind contact in the lane. He's really good at drawing it. Over the years, his basketball IQ is such that without diving, he became pretty good at just, using a head or shoulder fake to get a defender off their feet in the lane and either get an and one or get fouled. And then you put him at the line and he's, an 80% free throw shooter. So that's the biggest strength, in my opinion, in his game. There's other things he can do. He can shoot it from the outside. He can get in there. I mean, I wouldn't say he's an elite rebounder or anything, but if you need him to do it, he can do it. And he's just a nightmare for a defender because he's quick too. And so it's difficult to, you have to match his quickness as a defender to keep him limited. And that was a real challenge for teams in the Missouri Valley Conference to do. It'll be interesting from my point of view, having seen him play against quicker defenders in the SEC, whether he can continue to do that. I would think he could. He played pretty well against Power 5 teams when he was at Indiana State. So that's kind of what you're getting with Tyreke, a guy who, is, I wouldn't say he's a pure scorer because he does other things, but he's gonna drive teams crazy with the way they have to defend him, because he will make you pay if you have a lazy defender on him or if you give him too much space.
Yeah, that's another kind of follow-up to one I was going to ask was, it's impossible to know, but until it actually happens. But I was going to say, what do you think? How do you think he translates into the SEC? Because I was looking at his numbers on KenPom against, as KenPom has like the Tier A and Tier B schools, and he played well against. It wasn't like he had a significant drop off between the smaller Missouri Valley Conference schools and then playing teams like Loyola, then playing teams like, you look back in his freshman year, they played Auburn. You look at TCU, you look at other schools they had played throughout his career. I didn't notice that there was a significant drop off. So again, we don't know until he takes the court and we actually see him in the orange and white. But what are your thoughts on how his game and just kind of his play could translate into a bigger school? Because I mean, the Missouri Valley Conference is one of the better, usually year in year out, one of the better mid-major conferences. Not like it's not like a trash league. It's a league that can put in multiple schools into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and in a way, the transfer portal is kind of showing how good the league is, because there's been some players who have moved out who have done very well, including from Indiana State at the Power 5 level. I think because of the athlete he is, I think he'll be fine. It'd be different if his game was real limited to, to physical ability alone. Like say he was a 7-foot center who, couldn't move or anything like that. His athleticism will translate to whatever level he plays at. He's got a good basketball IQ. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I think that will certainly translate to the Power 5 level. The question that you always ask when anybody moves up from, mid-major to a Power 5 team is, it's one thing to see it a couple times a year, but when you're seeing it, for 20 conference games and good scouting and all of that. And the scouting in the league here is just as good as it is at the Power 5 level, but the level of athletes is different. So will he be able to contend with that? I think he can. I think he can be really successful at Tennessee. We just recently had a teammate of Tyreke's, Jake Laravia, transfer to Wake Forest, and he won ACC Player of the Week once and was all conference, and now is an NBA draft prospect. And Key was thought to be a better player than he was, different position, but his game translated just fine to the ACC. Tyreke, thought to be a better player, should be able to be. I'd be really surprised if he walked in there and struggled. And a big part of that, to switch gears a little bit on that mode, is a lot of it has to do with his work ethic. He is one of the hardest workers I've seen come through Indiana State. He never leaves the gym. He's in there all the time. It rubbed off on his teammates when he was here. So you're going to get a guy who's committed to, and he wants to prove himself. And you put those factors together, along with his, natural talent. And I think, Tennessee fans are going to like what they see.
Honestly, Todd, that sounds like the perfect fit for Rick Barnes. He loves gym rats, and it sounds a lot like a couple of guys already on the roster when I think of as a Guy Ziegler, and then assuming Josiah Jordan James comes back from his NBA, putting his name in the draft waters there. It sounds like those guys, they work extremely hard and take their craft seriously. And it sounds like Tyreke is cut from the same mold as those guys. Another one I've been to bring up too, just kind of looking at his transition to the SEC and a different role at Tennessee too, is, it seems like he's on the court a lot for Indiana State. Looking at his minutes per game, 34, 33, 34. His usage rate was really high too, for like 24 or 25%, basically, the last 3 years that he played. I'll be interested to see, what that will be and how that'll translate to Tennessee, because, that kind of goes to another question I'd written down for you is, what position did he play primarily there? Because was he more of a point guard, more off the ball guard, or was he just kind of like a Swiss Army knife? Because I look at Tennessee as they're still pursuing a transfer of true point guard. They have Zakai Ziegler, who's a sophomore, who will be a point guard as well. So I don't imagine he'll be playing too much point. So I think he'll be more of a kind of a 2 or 3, and depending on what lineup Tennessee's going with. But was he kind of just a jack of all trades in terms of positioning for Indiana State? And I will be interested to see, what his usage rate will be for Tennessee.
Yeah, I would say jack of all trades is a good way to put it. He had point guard capabilities, and he did bring the ball up the floor a decent amount when he was at Indiana State. When he arrived here, he was not necessarily recruited as a point guard. They had an established point guard who played with Tyreke, I think, 3 out of his 4 years in place. So he didn't necessarily have to play the one, but he can play it. He played it in high school. And the way his body type is, he can play the 3. I think in the Valley, he could play 3 because a lot of the players would be his size. Knowing the SEC, when I've seen it, it would be a difficult ask for him. He's a good defender, but He's going to give up some size to the threes in the SEC. I think that'd be a little bit of a difficulty. So he's predominantly a 2, but with capabilities to he's a tweener between both, a 3 and a 1. So there's a lot of different things you can do with him. You mentioned the usage rate, and I think that's going to be interesting for Tyreke to probably adjust to not having to have the load like he's had here. That's one thing. I wouldn't question it. I think he'll be fine. But, from his high school career through his time here, he's been the guy. Mm-hmm. And it'll be interesting to see how he kind of falls into line as being one of the guys at Tennessee. So that will be an interesting thing to look at from his from a mental point of view with Tyreke. I think he'll be fine with it, but that's certainly something that's going to be different for him to adjust to when he gets down there.
Again, if you're joining late on the podcast, Todd Aaron Golden, an Indiana State beat writer for the Tribune-Star. I have been on here to talk about Tyreke Key, the Tennessee transfer, I guess now signee into the program. We talked about his offense a lot, talked about his work ethic, and that leads into the other big aspect that I think Tennessee and Rick Barnes loves and looks at, and that is defense. What kind of defender is Tyreke? Because I'd look at, it's really hard to get a feel of how good a defender is from stats. I mean, you can look at steals, you can look at blocks, even those can be a little misleading. What kind of a defender is he? Because I look at his frame as a 6'3", 205 type of guard, and that's a big body guard that, I wouldn't want to go up against on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah, he's a pretty good defender. He can make things happen once in a while. I wouldn't say he's not going to get like 3 steals a game, although he may on an isolated basis. But he's sound. He doesn't take chances. Sometimes guys with high steal numbers actually aren't very good defenders. That just means they're gamblers. But he's sound. I wouldn't say he's an elite level defender. That's probably going too far. But he's a good defender. He's not going to be a liability playing defense. So solid. That's probably the way I describe him defensively. And he wasn't the guy that Indiana State. He wasn't their lockdown defender in his time here, but you didn't flinch when he was defending somebody either. So he was pretty good. And again, that's going to be something that's going to be interesting, with the level of talent being, better on a consistent basis, how that kind of plays out over the course of an SEC season for him. But I never thought he was a weak defender. I thought he was, pretty good.
Good. That is good to know. That's not, like you said, not a liability by any means, but yeah. So I think that'll fit in. Again, his work ethic. When you said that to me, that's all I needed to hear was that he has the work ethic that Rick Barnes and his coaching staff really look for in players, and that what those type of guys usually really thrive at Tennessee under this coaching staff too. I'm particularly intrigued by, as you've said a couple of times now, his ability and penchant to draw fouls. He was consistently ranked, I think, in the top 200 in the country on KenPom at foul drawn rate. This past his last year he only played 23 games. He took 117 free throw attempts, which in just 23 games, that would have been this past season for Tennessee. He would have had the most free throw attempts of anybody on the roster. 517 free throw attempts in his 114 games at Indiana State. Is that a case of, like you said, that is it him just having the knack? I think the word was pliable, which I thought was a good word. Is it a case of him just being able to be aggressive and drive for the basket, or is it maybe Vol fans got to watch Scottie Pippen Jr. the last couple of years and his ability to draw fouls and then kind of embellish it a little bit, but that kind of what you said, that kind of reminded me of Scottie Pippen Jr. because he was, I believe, the SEC leader in free throw attempts this past year, and by a long shot. Is that something that Tyreke just prides himself on, as being a guy who not draws charges but draws fouls and gets the free throw line?
Yes, no question. Everything you mentioned is what Tyreke does. All of the above. He's got a extreme desire to get to the rim. He looks at it almost like as a personal challenge, and he has his body is flexible enough to, he can draw some contact and then lean around the defender effectively and get a shot off, or draw a foul. He became good as he went along with his career at kind of getting a defender off his feet and getting the official to make the call is a kind way to put it. He's not a diver. I don't want to make it sound like he's out there, cheating or anything like that, but he's just, and he's fast. So, he's lightning quick going, from the perimeter to the rim. So that alone challenges a lot of defenders. And he's not afraid of going against anybody in the lane. So he'll challenge a 7-footer if the need calls for it. And a lot of times his quickness will draw a foul because he's able to get around, the rim protection attempt by a 7-footer. So he does all of that. He's got a remarkable will to do it. And I think that's half the battle. It's kind of like rebounding where, a lot of that is just complete personal will to do it. He's loves going to the rim, and then once he gets to the line, he's going to usually pay off. So I actually thought Indiana State didn't utilize him enough in that sense at times during his career, but he will get a lot. He's going to make a lot of. I'd say, on a given night, he could score more than half of his points at the line. So puts a lot of pressure on other teams, and he takes a little bit of a physical beating as a result of it, but he doesn't seem to mind. And other than his shoulder issues, never really affected his game. So yeah, you're getting somebody who's going to be pretty determined to get to the line.
Well, hey, literally a fourth of his 1,650 points at Indiana State came from the free throw line. 415 made free throws. So yeah, he does it really well. And man, also that scoring number is just really impressive too. I was looking at his numbers. He almost finished his Indiana State career with 1,600 points, 500 rebounds, and 200 assists. He was just short, like barely on the rebounds and assists to that mark, but that's and 100 steals too. Like that's a really impressive, longevity type of career numbers there. And getting that, just a couple more questions here for you, Todd. And again, very thankful for your time as you're recording this on Thursday afternoon. Is there a memory or two or anything like that in the 4 years that he was, or I guess technically 5, at Indiana State that really stands out to you? You and I were talking beforehand. You even watched him back in high school when he set the scoring record when he was in Tennessee here when he played for Clay County High School. But is there a moments that really stood out to you or stand out to you when you look back at the career of Tyreke Key at Indiana State?
Yeah, following Tyreke has been a long process for me because he was a mystery man for us. He signed. Nobody really heard of him when he was recruited out of Clay County High School, which is in the north. It's on the Kentucky border. If you drew a triangle from Nashville and Knoxville up to the border, you'd probably meet somewhere around Celina. It is remote. And Clay County obviously is not a school that gets a lot of attention, especially out of Tennessee. So my memory of Tyreke was the beginning. And, we were seeing scoring titles that make your eyes pop. That's the one thing to remember too. He used to be at one time, a volume scorer when he was in high school. So he's had that role. And so we were seeing 40-point games consistently coming out of there, high 30s, and everybody up here was wondering, well, what is this all about? How legitimate is this? He's at a smaller school, so you never know sometimes about those numbers, playing at a smaller high school, the level of competition you're getting. So I decided after our season was over, I guess that would have been in 2016 maybe, I think that was the year. I decided to go down there, and I went to Celina, which isn't easy to get to from this direction, but visited the town, soaked it all in, and went to a practice there at Clay County High School. The people there couldn't have been better. Loved going there. And I was only able to see the one game in Murfreesboro, which is where the state finals were or are. I don't know if they're there every year, but and really I wanted to see him prove to me that he could play at the Division I level. And so he goes out and scores 54 points in that game and set the single game Tennessee scoring record, and did everything in that game. I showed every bit of what he ultimately did do when he was at Indiana State. So that was a really fond memory. That really got people up here excited. And there were allusions to, his background is very similar in a way to what Larry Bird's was here. He came out of a very small rural area, and, had very similar, and people, and he was very fond of Terre Haute. He embraced it. So that was my early memories of him in terms of his time at Indiana State as a player, just his consistent excellence from start to finish. Tyreke is a quiet guy. I enjoyed he's very humble. I enjoyed speaking with him over the years because you never felt like you were getting anything other than somebody who was genuine. So I think the people in Tennessee are going to love it. I mean, he really is a Tennessean through and through. And so my memories are just kind of the vibe that Tyreke gave off as a person. And we'll miss him here. I mean, we're fortunate to get him here for the year that he got because of COVID. But, he's certainly one of the better players I've covered here, without question.
Yeah, and that more or less answered the other question I had, which was, kind of what was he like as a, not just as a player, but what's he like as a person? Because, I like trying to, delve behind more than just the players here on the show and get to know their personalities. That's why I like having players on when I can that, I've interviewed two women's basketball players who transferred to Tennessee as well, and hoping to get another one that transferred and get her on as well. But I would love to get Tyreke on the show if possible. But what was he like as a person? You kind of alluded to a few things there already, and just talking about how much it was a joy to cover him. But I assume he talked to the media a decent amount up there too. So what kind of person should Vol fans expect, and personality, I guess, on the court and off the court to see from Tyreke?
Just a humble, small town guy. He's not going to, he came out of his shell a little bit as he went along with his career here. And, but he's still, you're not going to see him on social media very often. He's a guy who wants to let his work do the talking for him. He's very nice to talk to, but he's not, he's not going to seek out media attention necessarily. It's not really his thing. So, he's not going to be a guy who's going to be a problem. From the point of view of off-court stuff, I don't recall anything at all with Tyreke. And he really embraces the places he lives. I mean, I used to see him out here in Terre Haute, shopping and stuff like that. I mean, he makes himself available. I'm not saying he goes out and makes himself available to people, but he's just wants to be one of the people, I think, is probably the best way I can put it. And, I think the people at Vol fans are going to really appreciate that. And, of course, he'll be judged on the way he plays and, how much Tennessee wins next year. But, he's a native son. He's proud of being from Celina. And, when I did my last story with him earlier this week, he wasn't a huge fan really of any college growing up. So it's not like he bled orange and white, but, I think he understands also that playing for his home state team is a big deal for him. It'll be a big deal for the people in Clay County. And he knows what a big deal, it is to play for Tennessee and what it means to the people there in the state. So he is embracing all of that. He's ready for the challenge of it. And I think, based on everything I've ever seen from Tyreke, he should be able to meet that challenge and be successful. And I know a lot of people here at Indiana State will be rooting for him. It hurts to lose players, but certainly nobody should have any complaints about the production he gave and the fact that the program ultimately ended up being in better shape after he was done than it was when he got here. So yeah, I think Tennessee fans have a lot to look forward to.
Todd Aaron Golden of the Tribune-Star, the Indiana State beat writer for the Tribune-Star. Really, thank you so much for taking time to do this and talk about Tyreke Key and what Tennessee fans should expect from the newest volunteer. If Vol fans who are just basketball fans in general just want to go follow your work and keep up with Indiana State and just kind of your thoughts on college basketball, where can they find your work and where can they follow you?
Tribstar.com is the mothership for my stories, and then it's Tribstar Todd or at Tribstar Todd on Twitter. That's the primary stuff. So, and I will be following Tyreke, so I probably will show up at some point either at in Knoxville or somewhere on the road where Tennessee is to see how he's doing. So certainly a lot of people here will be interested in that.
And for all these wondering, I will put the link to that article that Todd has mentioned, but the last one he did with Key, into the description on the podcast and into the description on YouTube as well. And so that way you can, I'll check it out if you want to, and read what Todd had written the last step, like he said, last article he did with Tyreke Key, and kind of Tyreke, describing why he was leaving Indiana State, choosing Tennessee, and just a bunch of other things as well in that article. I read it because I saw it, and I was maybe decide, hey, I'm going to reach out to you. Well, you're recommended behind the scenes. You're recommended by Dustin DePierac, who used to be in Knoxville, and I still keep up with him and friends with him online. So you recommended to me by him, and then check out the article, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely the guy that I need to have on here. So Todd, thank you so much for coming on Vol Basketball Fever. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. If I could say one more thing, and I never do this, but if you want to read about the background of Tyreke Key, like how he started, and it still informs kind of his present. I wrote a story. You can, if you do a Google search, it'd probably be under Tyreke Be Good, because that's the headline we had on it. But kind of goes into, it's a deep dive into his time. That was before he got here, but kind of illustrates his background there at Clay County. I imagine a lot of people in Tennessee would be interested in that. It's from 5 years ago, but that was a fun story to write. It's a long form story, but go check that one out if you want to kind of get the genesis of where Tyreke was coming from.
Great. Yeah, I'll link that one in the description as well. Well, thank you for that, Todd. And I'll have both those articles in there. And if anybody has any questions or wants to say anything to Todd, again, you can find him on Twitter. He is at Tribune-Star Todd. And it was Todd with 2 Ds on there as well, which y'all are probably seeing on the screen now at this point on YouTube. But if you're listening, it is Trib-Star Todd, and that is 2 Ds on his name there, Todd. Well, thank you so much, Todd, again. And for all of you listening at home or wherever you may be, at the gym, driving, wherever it is, thank you all so much for watching, listening along. If you're on YouTube, give this video a like. We appreciate that a lot. And subscribe today to the podcast and to the YouTube as well. Signing off for Todd, I'm Nathaniel, and this has been another episode of the Vol Basketball Fever podcast. Thank you for watching Vol Basketball Fever. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel while you're here. We appreciate all your support, and the show wouldn't be possible without Vol fans like you. Thank you.